like that, and that's where Springbok came from. Now, I don't want to get into the whole background of it right now. There's plenty of information on the website about this. So the question is, how do we relate to them, and what can we do to help those businesses succeed? So right now, that's how we came to relate with them. Our relationship with them now is we're a stakeholder in both, so it is in our best interest that both of those companies succeed in their initiatives, as it will financially help Datametrex. Okay. There is some crossover in the board. It's Paul Haber, our chairman, is running Draft Blockchain, and that's about it right now. So they're pretty much separate companies. That being said, we do everything we can to help them succeed, as their success is our success, and that's where we stand. So if there's any other questions about that, please let me know. But the summary is we're stakeholders, and we want them to succeed, as their success is our success, and we are helping them in their endeavors as much as we can wherever possible. Okay. And a couple other questions come in. So next question was around how do the milestones work with ideas and things like that. So the way it works is this. On any of the government contracts, there are evaluation periods. These are known in the contracts as milestones, and what they do is allow the government to check in on progress, or whatever they want to do at that point with what they're paying for. Now, with each milestone, there is an evaluation period at the end of the milestone that is reserved for the government. That is generally 10 days. Okay. And so at the end of the milestone, there's a 10-day evaluation period. Once that's over, then the government has X months to finish up their evaluation, greenlight the next milestones, and pay their bills. Okay, so how it's worked. Now, how does this relate to DM? The question is, how do these reflect into the financials? So when the government says that they're going to be finished at the end of a particular quarter or on a particular date, that's when the evaluation period for the 10 days that I mentioned, generally 10 days that I mentioned, and then the bill pay comes into play. So in our particular case with ideas, what we talked about earlier was that's going through March of next year, and the questions become, does this reflect in Q1 and Q2? It's going to depend on that evaluation period, as this one straddles the line. If it comes in after the Q2 deadline, it'll go into Q2. If it comes in before, and then the bills get paid, it'll come in Q1. So that's going to be entirely up to that evaluation and when it finishes, but it will finish within one of those 2 quarters, or the government will run afoul of their contractual obligations, and that's not going to occur. So it hasn't occurred yet. So the most likely scenario is it's in Q2. That's the most likely. There is an outside chance it's at the end of Q1, but as in that's coming up in March. We'll see. But again, that evaluation period does straddle the end of March. So if it pushes into the first week in April, then it'll be reflected in Q2. So next question, smart factory release. So it's been a few months since we talked about in press release about a smart factory release, and the question is coming in, what's going, are there any updates there? Well, so far so good. The project's moving forward nicely. There's no hiccups or delays, and the integration for this piece is running pretty smoothly. At the same time, when we're talking about factory processes and things like that, these are not fast initiatives. It's not something you just plug in and run your whole factory on. So those processes will take time, and this is going to be measured, in months and quarters to begin with, and then, measured out in years if things are successful in those first evaluations. So the way an evaluation like that goes down is, or something like this that's extraordinarily complex, is you'll run it inside of a beta environment for quite some time. And that depends on, the industry. Like I said, in this particular case, you're looking at a couple quarters for those types of betas to make sure that there's no problems, no hiccups, etc. In the most extreme case, what you do is you fail your whole manufacturing line, which for anybody that's in manufacturing can know shutting down the whole plant or something like that could be hugely detrimental to what's going on. And in the case of what we're doing in AIs and prediction, this is increasing over time, and we're seeing the existence of the beta test and the longer beta testing periods as we proceed over time it's an indication, and you see it across the industry. Now, so I think the most obvious place where people might have seen this, or it might be visible to them on in their daily lives, would probably be video games. And why do I say that? Well, AI is used extensively in video games, and they're available to the consumer, right in your home. And one of the things you see a lot of lately, or over the past decade, in software itself, games, etc., are the existence of these beta tests, whether they're labeled early access or beta tests, etc. In some cases, these now run into the years. Now, that's not the case here. But if you look at, say, like I said, the video game industry, some of the early accesses, etc., runs into the years. The reason is, like I said, failure at some points can be catastrophic, and you definitively want to prevent that. It's the science of a million details, and you have to make sure that those million details are covered. So far so good. Integration is going smoothly, no hiccups. We're running. We'll have more to report out of the results of the factory after it's ran for a couple quarters, and we will see how that progresses. So the next general question comes around stock options and NCIB, and I want to answer these several questions together, as I think they're related. So people are asking, what's the purpose of the NCIB programs, and why do we, early in November, why were there cancellations of stock options, incentive stock options, etc.? So the NCIB and the stock options are related in the fact that one of the longer term goals for us is to keep a reasonable cap structure. Okay? And the NCIB is designed to, for us to recover, just like any other company, to recover some of those outstanding options, keep the cap structures reasonable, etc. At the end of the day, it's about making sure that, we're providing value to shareholders, investors, etc., and, keeping the company in check. So that's the purpose of the NCIB. So the first 17 million shares or so were purchased back. And we also did another thing, is we canceled about 13 million or so incentive stock options. Now, the rationale behind this is exactly the same thing as, we're trying. If there's 13 million stock options sitting around out there, and we just bought back 17 million, then we'll wipe it, we can wipe this out at that particular time going forward. So everybody that was involved in those did so voluntarily, and they did it as part of a longer term strategy, like I said, to keep cap structures reasonable, and to provide those values. So the people that, volunteered to give up incentive stock options and things really believe that, in the company, and they did, like I said, they did it voluntarily, and that's what we're doing, in those areas. Okay, next question. Long-standing, Bit9. So the question comes in, what are the relationships between Datametrex and Bit9? So Bit9, all right, just a little bit of background. Bit9 is one of the groups we've been working with for many, many years. Okay, they're a long-term client. They've been involved in several initiatives with us over the years, including JVs, different industry initiatives, etc. And it's been going, like I said, on for many years. So Bit9 is a long-term client. As a long-term client, along with some of our other long-term clients, we develop relationships with them, and we're happy to have them on board. The fact that this clientele, Bit9 and the other clientele keep coming back is indicative of the relationships and the value that we're adding there. And so do we expect the relationships to continue? Yes, we do. We have no indication or reason to believe that any of these relationships right now are damaged or anything like that. And these will continue. So that's the relationship with Bit9. There, etc. Excuse me. Okay. Change of business. What is a change of business? I'm going to just briefly address this, but change of business is more easily addressed if you look it up on Investopedia if you want a more in-depth explanation. But basically, it's to keep businesses from going outside of their mandate. So if you want to go and invest in, a fruit company, they're not going to end up, going on a mission to Mars or something of this nature. That's what change of business means. So if you see it rolling around or things like that, that's what it's referring to. Change of business is governed by stock exchanges and governed by their governance programs, not by Datametrex. Okay, it is a governing tool. It is not something that we control or do anything with. So no, we don't have any control over that. Okay. Now, the rest of the piece I want to get into is hopefully I can cover all the rest of the questions in laying out what we've done over the past month and what we're doing moving forward in the next 40 minutes or so with our three Nexology, DMEVS, and Medicol. So, as you guys have seen, we've made a lot of big moves in the last month and the last, both in management. We've made an acquisition with Imagine, and there's just been a lot of moves around that front. And I wanted to lay all that out there. What are we doing? What's the strategy, etc. So, in general, very large brush, Q4 for us has been about solidifying, the teams we have in place, putting the right people in the spots we need them, getting the right additions to our team and our staff, and getting them ready and empowered to help us move forward in these three verticals. Now, we are super happy to have the new management people in place, and we've put in place 4 people in the last recent bit to come in and help with us, and I want to go through them quickly. The first, Charles Park. Charles Park is coming on at Nexology. Okay. He's been on for about a month or so now, and will be helping us on the business front there. Charles has a long background in game theory and building businesses. AI and game theory are very closely related for those who are looking into it. And that's the reason that we think that one of the reasons we think that Charles can, really help us in the nexology department. These are going to be just brief overviews, and then we'll go into every vertical in more detail. So the next one is Dominic LeMay. So Dominic has been on board for a couple weeks-ish. So Dominic's background, and he will be working with dm.v, so the electric vehicle services. Dominic's background is in the transport industry, and it seems like a really good fit here. Former COO via rail, worked extensively in Quebec transportation, and he brings a new dimension to what we do in dm.v, and also brings the large corporate experience that is going to be necessary for this vertical to succeed. And that's something we've been looking for ever since the idea came up a few months ago, back in late summer, mid to late summer, about the electric charging, electric vehicles, etc., and really engaging in this. It was clear that we needed to find somebody with this background to come in. And again, we'll go into that in just a minute in more detail per section. And lastly, the last two that we brought on came with Imagine Networks. This is Dr. John Chan and Ray Yu. So Dr. Chan and Ray collectively have built Imagine Networks over the past several years into a prospering set of companies in the Alberta province, in Calgary and Edmonton. So they bring not only medical experience and physical footprints in Alberta that we need as we're moving forward with Medical, etc. They also bring some of the business building experience. What does it take to build businesses inside the medical vertical? Right there, been there, done that. They've already built these businesses. So additionally, bringing on people that have the experience in those verticals, the knowledge, etc., is something that we've been looking forward to, and we're glad to have them here. So Dr. Chan, brings this on the medical side, and Mr. Yu, Ray Yu, brings us on the pharmaceutical side. So, and as these are all collected, etc., into, excuse me, as these are collectively related, this will allow us to expand and advance Medical more quickly. So those are the four major plays that we have made as far as shoring up the management structure across the verticals we're in. And what does this do? Well, it brings people to the table in general that have experience in the verticals we're in. Okay? Now, what does that allow us to do? Well, it allows us to work with strategic initiatives, okay? And we can start laying out longer-term plans. And also, longer-term plans, etc., as opposed to just tactical plans. And that's one of the primary things that we're aiming to do, through the end of the year and through, the first of next year, is let's get those established. What do those roadmaps look like for the next 3 months? What do they look like for the next 6 months and then the next 12 months? How do we execute them? And then, how do we adjust as those go along? So that's one of the major things it does. The other thing it does is it brings, credibility and knowledge to the table. Credibility in the fact that we have people that are involved directly in these verticals, and publicly involved in what we're doing in these verticals. and have worked for reputable companies and done reputable things across their lifetimes. So that's credibility. Now, how do we? The questions that come: how do they get involved with us, and how do we select them? Well, in all of these cases, these aren't short selection processes. The vetting on these cases has been going on for months in all of them. So, we don't jump in, especially when we're hiring some high-powered management and executives. We don't just jump in and see what happens. There's a very extensive vetting process, and a lot of this started back in July, August in certain cases, and we've been going around it that long to ensure that we got the right people with the right experience for this company at this time. So it's not something that we do quickly, and it's also not something that we do flippantly. Now, in addition to that, we operate all across Canada, so that helps. A lot of people claim they're always hiring the best people, but usually they're hiring the best people in the next 50-kilometer radius that they can find. They're not necessarily grabbing the best people across the entirety of a country or the world. And having the ability to work across Canada like this, and in Korea, in other cases, expands that for us and really allows us to grab the best people we can find, regardless, independent of the geography, etc. So that's how we put them together. And every one of the aforementioned 4 people have come on board because they really believe in what we're doing. They've agreed to, they think it's going to work. In some cases, they're long-term shareholders of the company too. And they're really invested in what we're doing. They think that our ideas are good. They like where we're positioned. And they think we can make a real impact and a real splash in these verticals moving forward. And that's why they're here. Because they believe in the products, they believe in what we're doing, they believe in the people. Otherwise, they wouldn't be here. Okay. So, moving forward with these verticals, here's what we're doing over the next little bit. So, with Nexology, right now, the focus. Let me back that up. We'll start with Nexology. Okay, we're going to go through that. We'll go through Medicall, and then we'll end up with the DM/EVS in that order. And so we expect to spend some time on each one, and that's what we're going to do. Right now, so what is Nexology doing right now? Okay, so Nexology has brought in last quarter quite a few contracts and renewals in addition to what we're doing, with the government on the longer term fronts. Okay. Now, what we're seeing inside Nexology is an expansion. We're seeing some different areas where the tech has been applied, and as the tech evolves over time, we're seeing its flexibility. I guess that's the best way to put it. So as these applications mature, and when I say applications, we're talking about installations, at Latte or Samsung, the factory that we talked about earlier, which is not a mature installation yet. But as these mature, and as the processes around them are refined, and as the tech is applied, you start to see that it is applicable in other areas. That's where one of the factories piece came up, and that's where these are being suggested. So what we're focused on now is identifying those and expanding. We feel we've got a really good foothold in the government sector, and as that moves forward, now what we're doing here is expanding into the private sector, right? And we're bringing, and Charles is here on board to help us do that, to help identify those pieces and move those opportunities, into revenue, right? That's the idea. So in Q1, let's back up before we go to Q1. One thing that I missed earlier I want to address while we're in this is there was a question that came in about FIKE, which is the conference we were at last month with Nexology. So before I move off Nexology, let me grab this one last question coming in. We'll go back to what we were saying. So the question became, what came with FIKE, and can you tell us anything about it? So we had a really good conference at FIKE. That was about a month ago. There's a reason we weren't on the Discord. And that stands, just real quick, FIKE is an acronym for Forum International de la Cybersécurité. It's an international cybersecurity forum that was held in Montreal. Okay? And that was last month. Now, we had a really good FIKE. There were a lot of good contacts and conversations at the FIKE event. And right now, what we're doing with those is we're following up on those with the potential clients that we met there. So we have garnered quite a few demos that we're still putting out right now, for people we met at FIKE. And that ranges from various government agencies, around the world, to private sector, right? So there was a lot of both public and private sector represented at the FIKE conference. And we were able to connect with, like I said, multiple entities from multiple countries, including police forces, government entities, both on the public and private side. So, we also had some interest, coming in from the different cybersecurity pieces from multiple different countries. And we got a lot of demos with some people we were trying to, we've been trying to reach out to for quite some time. So one of the harder things about enterprise sales is, getting your foot in the door and getting to the right people. In this case, this was one of the more successful conferences that we've been to, and it's opened up a lot of avenues for us. One of those avenues is, ongoing representation at these conferences, and we've been invited to participate at several more extensions of these worldwide, both, across Europe and Asia and even down into Australia. So, as these mature and if these become material, we will be reporting on them. But in general, very successful conference for us. We got our foot in the door in quite a few places we've been trying to put our foot in the door to, and we'll definitively go back to this one and, keep going. Okay, so that was FIKE. So what are we doing, back to what are we doing in Q1, Q2 with Nexology? Well, obviously we're going to finish up, one of the concentrations in Q1 is going to be executing on the milestones. In the government contracts, making sure that all the I's are dotted, T's are crossed, etc. But the other thing that is really exciting about this one are those doors that are opened that we talked about. And this is going to be one of Charles's mandate, along with this, is to let's follow up on those and see what we can do about using some of what we've learned with Latte, Samsung, and the initiatives we have with them. We've talked about, email initiatives. We've talked about, predictive analytics initiatives. And these are showing fruit in the fact that these initiatives and the representation that we're doing with, in there is opening those doors, right? And allowing us to get the demonstrations that we wanted, to get the demos that we've been trying to get, across prefectures, all the way from, like I said, Europe to Australia, and allow us to execute on those. So the first step is getting in the door. we successfully got in the door several times. And so that's where we are. We're in the door. Now it's time to execute. Now, additionally, there's something that we can announce on here that, because it's in the public eye already, is at the end of this first milestone, we're going to be presenting in a more public manner a new evolution of the product that we've been working on through the Ideas program and stuff. Now, we were first able to unveil this in a very, very limited capacity several months ago in Ottawa. We were able to open it up in a public capacity at FIKE. So if one of the things, meaning there's a huge overhaul to, in addition to Nexus Smart, that is being worked on in this contract. And part of what we do with the government is it allows us to keep the IP that we develop for them and then, resell it in certain capacities. And we're going to be able to unveil this through Q1 and into the end of Q1 and first of Q2, so that all of the investors and everybody can see what exactly they were working on, and how it benefits the company, how it changes the software. And there's some really, really incredibly good designs out over the course of Q1, shepherding that out, shoring up those relationships, running down all those contracts, and expanding those verticals, or expanding, not the verticals, expanding the relationships we already have, are the mandates that Charles is going to be taking on. And that's where we're going to be going through Q1 in Nexology, into Q2, etc. So, the veil's getting ready to come off on a lot of things, especially on those government contracts. So stay tuned on that. There will be more information of that, most likely coming out in January, after the holidays. So that's when you should expect it. So look mid-January, somewhere in there, to 1st of February, those 2 weeks. All right, that's my best guess as to when we'll be able to expand on what we're saying. Worst case scenario, probably February. So that's super exciting. We've been working on that for a year now. And we really want to show you guys what we've been doing under there, and we're going to be able to do that publicly. Now, so next, Medicom. This one's super good. We were really, really excited with the acquisition of Imagine Networks. So one of the things that's been very clear to us over the last few months is we can't do some of the things that we really want to do, and a lot of the things that are in demand by our clientele, especially in the industries we're serving them in, without some sort of physical presence. Now, we've made up for that in Vancouver in the clinics that we, in the offices that we have, both downtown Vancouver, and there's also, ScreenPro Security has offices in downtown Vancouver that we share with them, that allows us to do some of this work. And what does this mean? Private patient scenes, there's certain work, medical work, that can't be done in a patient's home, can't be done on a set, can't be done, driving the equipment to wherever they are, or it's very difficult to do so, which requires, the presence of those physical facilities. Also, there are laws around what we can and cannot do without a physical presence in certain provinces. One of the things that a lot of people don't realize in Canada is you don't have one healthcare system. We've got 14. Each province, territory, et cetera, has got their own healthcare rules and laws. Some of those laws require a presence in the province you're in, or in the jurisdictions you're in order to do certain operations. So this opens up all of Alberta for us for those particular operations. Now, Some examples, higher end examples. We've had people, they need IVs for various reasons, both treatment wise, recovery wise, etc. We can't do that in somebody's house. There's a lot of that goes on, particularly in the production industries. There are private screening requirements and different tests that have to be done that require, say, an X-ray facility or something like that. Now, in general, those have gone, if we're going to take that in, that's got to go to an outsourced area, and we're not able to capture that. With Imagine Networks, on the ground, we are able to do that. We now have businesses that have been doing this type of work for multiple years now successfully. And what we're doing with them by bringing them on board at this time is we're laying out the final pieces of that groundwork to have the holistic solution that the clientele is demanding, right? So there's certain things that we can do through telehealth, and we definitely, definitively think that that is going to be a wide-reaching solution going forward. It's firmly in our belief that a lot of the strain we're seeing on the medical systems today and things like this could be alleviated through these types of adoptions. Now, so how do you do that? Well, we've got the talent now, and we've got the people in there that have been there, have done that, etc., that will allow us to grow that business and to grow it into the aspects that that we're trying to take on right now. Meaning, we've talked about pharmaceuticals, we've talked about prescriptions and stuff, and we're able to service those right now. But how do you do that not at a local capacity in one or two jurisdictions, but how do you do that in a national capacity? Or how do we do that across all the jurisdictions that we're meant to serve in Canada? It's not something that's just pops out of a hat. That being said, by bringing on, say, Ray, for this particular case, we now have the expertise in management with somebody who has started tackling these problems and has looked at this before, and will allow us to respond to the needs of the customers now and expand the business in those areas. And so as those pieces are going down, we're providing the framework, the footprint to allow that business to grow within the bounds of the restrictions medically. Now, speaking of that, one thing I do want to bring up on here is there's a lot of lawsuits running around that right now, particularly happening in British Columbia. Okay, so we have been, we do keep our eye on these, and we keep a very, very close eye on these. Not just because of Medi-Call, but because when we first stuck our toes into the medical space, it became very clear to us that the landscape's changing faster than the law can keep up. Now, we went through this with COVID, and British Columbia was also the hotbed for this type of legislation. Whereas, when COVID hit, there was not enough testing facilities, not enough tests, not enough labs, not enough machinery. We'd never dealt with something like this. The world hadn't. So those regulations changed every other month, right? What people were allowed to do, what they're not allowed to do, and it changed province to province. Certain provinces were allowing lower levels of expertise to do swabbing, for instance, so people with less training, and bringing those in. That's one of the ones that changed constantly. But what these lawsuits are trying to sell is two things, from a high level: what's allowable from third-party healthcare providers inside Canada. Okay, and that is something that we've had our pulse on for multiple years now. So we don't expect disruptions to business, as the medical fallout or as the legal fallout comes. As it's going to be adapt like we've adapted for the past 2 years and keep going. Now, what we do expect, and this is, I don't have a crystal ball, but I do expect changes in the medical system, definitive changes in in the Canadian medical system as it's buckling right now. And, we're seeing more and more people start looking for these alternative solutions, right? And that's what we're going to be here. We're right here to provide. So now we have physical presence in multiple provinces now. We have 2 experienced entrepreneurs on board, in both Dr. John Chan, and Ray Yu. And additionally, they have experience in 2 different facets of the business. So both, the MD portion of this, and the pharmaceutical portion of this. Now, the pharmaceutical portion was talent that we did not have prior to this acquisition lined up. People that have been involved in pharmaceuticals, we have the medical staff, the nursing staff, etc., but not somebody that is specialized in most of their career. So that's what that acquisition brings on board, and it will allow us to expand the clientele of Medi-Call, expand the programs we're legally allowed to do through the company. So think of it more now as holistic solutions to healthcare. What can we do in addition to our public health system now to make the healthcare more accessible, more affordable, and bring that to everybody? This allows us to continue to expand and work within the framework of the existing laws while the legal frameworks catch up to what the demands are of modern society that has changed, like I said, extensively over the last couple of years. So with the addition of Imagine, we're able to do that in Alberta, and what they're going to be doing over the next few months. And we've got a few initiatives that have still been in the works on this, and we'll hopefully be able to report on those in the next couple of weeks, or a couple of those initiatives. But let's get those off the ground. And like I said, those initiatives, we're working on several initiatives with different drug companies, and also different healthcare providing entities to expand the reach of Medi-Call, get more people in the door, and get that revenue moving. And now that we've got Ray and John on board, we've got a long established medical facilities on board with a history of doing things properly, etc. We feel that we're in a really good position to go out and provide that expanded healthcare and that accessible healthcare that we've been talking about with Medi-Call all along. So Ray and John, in the end of this year and Q1, are going to be integrating themselves into the management teams, working with us to get those last few initiatives out the door for this year. And then how do we take the success that's been realized in Alberta and expand that out to our different facilities and integrate them into the Medi-Call system. So that's what's going to be happening in the next couple of months with the Medi-Call piece. And this is going to allow instantaneously provides us with more revenue, more profit, more clientele, and expands our business exponentially with this one pickup. And we're very happy to have them on board. Okay, last one, going forward, dm.v. So, Dominic Lemay was brought on board at dm.v to help us in the upper management, etc., and to really take a hold of this and help us drive it to the next level. So Dominic comes to us with an extensive background in transportation. He's the COO of Via Rail, or he was the COO of Via Rail. Also worked extensively in transportation systems in Quebec, etc. STM, XO, on down the line. And he was also, present during the transitions, through gas-powered to more eco-friendly vehicles, particularly in Montreal, etc. So, Dominic brings a new dimension to the table to what we do. And it's something that we're really glad to have. Because Dominic, in that industry, brings a large corporate background, which, in our mind, is completely necessary for what we're trying to do with DMEVS. Now, how does this differ a little bit from the aforementioned verticals? Well, there's two types of models here that we have. I'm going to paint with a very broad brush. There's two types of models that the consumer sees, in EVs, and let's talk to both of them. The first model I want to just call the model for individuals. This is what you see every day, all right? And this is a very tightly contested space. Now, what do I mean by that? So when we're talking about electric charging, let's just work with the vehicles for a minute. The most obvious place for the model for individuals is the gas station, okay, for consumers. There's obviously multiple gas stations running around, multiple providers, all kinds of people in the chain between, how the oil gets pumped out of the ground to when it enters your gas tank, right? So within that ecosystem, even let's just say just within Canada, there's many providers, okay? So there's obviously room for more than one solution. There's obviously room for more than one provider. And that particular aspect pervades politics, et cetera, et cetera. The second model that you see a lot that you don't interact with as directly is more like fleet management. And this is where Dominic can really get into the game and what he can bring to the table and really help us. So what does that mean? Now, it's not quite, what is this? It's not, go to your gas station. These are the infrastructure lines that run off everything else. Okay, so you're talking about buses, transport, trains, transports from, trucking to, the last mile transports. For those of you familiar with the transportation industry, last mile is how do you get it from, the local post office or whatever to the house. And that type of fleet management and corporate infrastructure pieces are what Dominic's been dealing with for many, many, many years. Okay? Now, this is a little bit different in the fact that these games aren't as diversified as the model I previously mentioned, meaning, when you have a fleet provider for, say, a group of buses for a city, there's only going to be one running around that city. So while there may be there's room for multiple groups definitively nationwide, it's also, it's a winner-take-all game if you're just looking at local markets, right? So what I mean by that? Well, like I said, there's not enough room in every market for every individual player. And this is an aggressively expanding industry. It's going to be possibly the most aggressively expanding industry in the next 10 years. We really wanted somebody that could talk to that corporate side of things and could help us along this. And Dominic, with his background, was uniquely positioned to do that. So what Dominic's going to be doing is working, with Greg, who is already there and leading the DMEVS initiatives. In fact, Greg's over in Korea right now. We'll be returning this week, working with EVAR. And right now, Dominic's getting his feet wet. He's integrating himself into what we're doing, getting familiar, etc. And we're laying out how we're going to attack, those different markets. Meaning, how do we bust into some of these corporate? How do we bust into some of this corporate infrastructure? How do we get our products into the hands and prove to the people that are running these things that we've got the best one on the market in that case. And with Dominic, he brings a Rolodex. He also brings, contacts, etc., and a general know-how of how all that's done, right? How is fleet management done? What are the pitfalls? What are they going to be looking for as far, for contracts? How do we get into places with limited contract availability? He's been there, done that, managed these fleets, etc. And that's why Dominic is on board, is to help with that large, that large space of corporate fleet management that we really didn't have a good input into so far. So for DMEVS in Q1, it's going to be solidifying, the supply chain as things are coming across from Korea. So that's something that we've been actively involved in for the last 2 months, is getting things converted, getting them moving across. For the pieces that have already moved across, the chargers, some of the trucks and stuff that are running around in British Columbia, they're being actively used by some of our clientele already, like I said, in a few other places, and that's going really well. So they're really happy, and especially some of the clientele that we service in other aspects of the business that operate some seriously remote locations. Sometimes this has been a boon for them. So having somebody that can respond to their needs and understands, their industry and how it works and basically how to respond on a moment's notice has been a great boon and benefit for these guys. So that's going well. And as Greg works to get those things across, works with our partners in Korea to get the tech across, to get it installed, and et cetera. Dom is coming on board to give the more strategic vision and aspects to what we're doing specifically in the EVS vertical, and to help shore that up and position us as a nationwide player, not only in the small markets of electric charging. What I say by that, the individual markets, right? So the individual chargers for people, for gas stations, for golf courses, parking lots, pools, all the other places where the chargers can go in, but also for the corporate infrastructures, the fleet managements, the buses, the fleets of vehicles that DHL runs, for instance, or postal services. All these types of things are looking to work with electrical charging infrastructures, working on getting off fossil fuels, et cetera. And Dom provides, the knowledge and the expertise to work in that facet of the business. So that's going to be one of our major focuses going into Q1, as we solidify, the supply chain and everything else over the next couple of weeks. So that's what we expect out of them, and what we're going to be doing in that vertical moving forward. So let me see if we can grab a few more questions here as they're coming in. All right. So with those changes, what does that allow us to do? Okay. So good changes, etc. So what does it allow us to do? It allows us to promote DM at a higher level. It adds a lot of credibility to what we're doing, right? We were really happy with the credibility we have with the clientele we have, so the Canadian government, U.S. government, companies like Samsung and Latte, and these large players that continue to come back and continue to re-up with us. That said, that credibility is good. It's definitively good. But when we add people, like Charles, like Dominic and John and Ray onto the management team, and we can do that in such a short time frame, in these compact time frames, that also adds a dimension of credibility that goes beyond just that clientele. It brings credibility to the negotiating table, when we're doing contracts. It brings credibility, in the investment realm. It brings credibility in, the capital markets. We're going after the people that know what they're doing, that have experience in these fields, and we're putting the best people in place to work in those verticals and help establish those visions. So, and take those visions now that they're established and then turn them into reality, right? So it's all about execution at that phase. So the groundwork's laid. We believe we've got good groundwork for DMEVS. We believe we've got good groundwork for Nexology, and we've got good groundwork laid for Medical. And as that credibility increases, and as we're able to execute on the plans that we're putting forward and getting those, getting set to hit the ground running in Q1 on all fronts, that's what these pickups really allow us to do. So it positions us even further, as a real player in these markets, as somebody who can make a difference, and as somebody who can provide solutions to the problems that we're addressing with you. So that's what we're doing. That's what's, the hope and the projection of what we're going to be aiming for in Q1. And that's the reasons, that we're bringing on the high-powered management to work in these individual verticals that we are. So we spent the last year or so trying to figure out where our best bets are and where we can attack the different markets, using our AI tech as a basis. We believe we found those in both Medical and DMEVS, along with our partners in both of those endeavors. And now that we have the management in place, the facilities in place, and the acquisitions in place, all this is lining up so that we can put in, a really, hit the ground running in Q1 and, start expanding those verticals. So all the pieces are in place. We've got, a couple, like I said, hopefully we'll have a couple more announcements before everybody leaves to the holidays. And we'll see how those go. But expect that, heading into Q1 and heading out to the end of this year and the first of next year, to DM to be really focused and really executing on those verticals. As we've got everything we need in place, and now it's just up to us to execute it and make it work. And that's what we've been working on through Q4, and that's what we're going to go forth with next year. And with the aim, to bring those plans forward, to bring them to fruition, and to execute for everybody, in this room and our investors on the side. So I hope that lends some visibility into what we're doing. And, we will aim to follow up on this in more material releases in the future, and what we can expect out of those verticals as that gets solidified moving forward. So I hope everybody, that answers the questions that people have had on this. And, I wish everybody a happy holidays, and thanks for being with us with DM. We're very excited to see all this come together, and we're even more excited, as this is all coming together right now, to watch it execute, and, watch those plans come to fruition. And as those plans solidify over the next, month or, 6 weeks, into, the period after the holidays, we want to be able to roll out all those execution plans, show them more, make them more visible, more transparent, and, get them out there into the public, and you guys can see what we can do with these verticals. So like I said, I guess the recap is, I think we've got all the pieces in place now. We've got the proper management, the proper leadership. We've got the ability to execute. We have the finances to execute. And now we've got the plans that are being put in place, and now it's time to go do it. And that's what we've been doing over the past quarter. I hope that's instructive. Please have a great holiday, and we will talk to you guys next time. Thank you.